Bonjour Emin, merci de nous rejoindre aujourd'hui sur Cryptost pour parler de votre projet AVAX Avalanche. C'est la première euh, interview en anglais sur ce média français. Même si je vous poserai toutes mes questions en français, vous y répondrez en anglais. Dans cette vidéo, on va parler de AVAX, son consensus, la DeFi et son rôle dans l'écosystème et bien sûr la roadmap pour les prochains mois et les prochaines années pour AVAX. Avant de parler d'AVAX, parlons un petit peu de vous, Emin. Comment êtes-vous arrivé dans la blockchain?
That's a long story. It goes back a long time. I got into blockchains before the word blockchain had been conjoined. It was, I think my first foray into this area was in 2002. So that's 6 years before Satoshi. And I built the world's first crypto coin that is minted by proof of work. So it's a system called Karma. It was published in 2003, and it is academically very well cited. It has one of the key components from Bitcoin, but it lacks the consensus protocol improvements that Satoshi brought on top of it. So Satoshi did bring some big, brilliant step forward on top of the work I did, but I predate him by 6 years, and that was my very first foray. And what happened, Valentin, was kind of interesting. So when I started going into that area, I went in because I decided that we needed a magic internet money for peer-to-peer file sharing. So there were people using peer-to-peer file sharing applications, and they were generally trying to take things and not give things. They were trying to download and not allow other people to upload. And so this is called free riding or leeching. And you have this in any system where humans are involved. People want to take more than they want to give. And the mechanism that we know works for dealing with this is some kind of a game where you need money to download things and you need to earn money on other occasions. And you earn this magic internet money by uploading things. That was my idea. And it was a good idea. And it's a very well-cited system academically. But very soon after I published this work, my colleagues came to me and said, look, you're a young assistant professor, and this is an interesting line of work, but you'll never find funding for it. So all of the country is currently, at that time I was in the US, I'm still in the US. The United States was completely freaked out over the 9/11 attacks. And they were very, very, very concerned about terrorist financing. So that everyone said, and they were right, if you stay in this area, you'll get no financing. The government will never support this kind of work. You will get no funding for your students, and you should find another venue. So I left that area. And I came back to it after Bitcoin. So I looked into Bitcoin after the paper was published, and it seemed like a brilliant step up from what we were working on. So it was really, really cool stuff. And then we decided to look more carefully into some of the boundary conditions, into the security claims that Satoshi made. And I then became famous for proving that Satoshi was wrong, that the core central security claim behind Bitcoin, as stated at the time, was incorrect. And so that got me a lot of hatred, but it is science. And in fact, what happened was also kind of fun. Everybody crowdfunded a series of simulators to try to prove us wrong. So this was me and Itai Eyal, who's currently a professor at the Technion in Israel. So Itai and I discovered this, and they tried to prove us wrong. And every single simulator reaffirmed what we discovered. So then we went from everybody hating me, hate mail, death threats, to suddenly everybody inviting me to their conferences, and I was one of the first people in this, one of the first academics in this area, and I've been leading the way since then. I've worked on a whole range of topics since then, helping Bitcoin, helping Ethereum. Some of the protocols I've developed have been at the core of multiple different coins that have been launched, and most recently I've been working on Avalanche, the new next generation protocol.
Ok, merci beaucoup. On parlera de tout ça plus en détail dans toute cette vidéo. Avant ça, revenons un petit peu en arrière. Vous avez lancé votre projet à travers une ICO il y a quelques années. C'était une grande réussite.
Yeah, we kicked off the bull run. So before us, I think, we spent about a year looking for funding. We spent about a year just in a bear market. Nobody believed in crypto. Everybody thought we were that the entire space was destined for I don't know what, like we were doing this, all the prices were doing this, everything was going down. And then our ICO was incredibly successful, overnight sensation. We got far more money than has ever been raised since 2018 in one offering. And I was very happy about that. We were told that it would never happen that way, and it happened exactly as we thought. One of the key features behind that, Valentin, was very simple. We're very science-driven. We had polled our audience. We knew the demand. We had numbers on this. We had done our homework. So it wasn't whatever. It wasn't a Hail Mary that paid off. It was really calculated. We knew exactly what the demand was, and we knew what we were offering was going to be well received by the market. And we knew much more importantly, we knew what the market needed. It needs a scalability solution. It needs a governance solution. It needs a flexible infrastructure. So these are critical. So we knew that we were going to do okay. And then we ended up doing, more than okay, I think. It was great.
Avec AVAX, vous souhaitez construire et bâtir l'Internet de la confiance. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous expliquer un peu ce que c'est l'Internet de la confiance?
Sure. So Avalanche, its byline is Internet of Finance. So we want to reimagine the way finance is done. My job here, I'm in Brooklyn right now, right outside my window, right over there is Wall Street. I look at them every day, okay? My job is to change everything that happens there. My job is to change all of the business models. So simply put, what we need is a much better, more transparent infrastructure for creating digital assets. We are not a terminal project. We are not a single coin project. We are not here to replace the dollar. We're not here to replace gold. We're not here to replace the euro. That's just not us. Bitcoin is trying to do those things, and I wish it success. I hope it wins. I'm rooting for it. That's fantastic. We're not here to try to be a general purpose computer like Ethereum is trying to be a general purpose computer. We are here to build the world's most scalable blockchain that can handle the demands of having digitized all of assets, all of them. If there's an asset and you want to buy it, you should buy it on a blockchain without a counterparty. You shouldn't have to rely on anybody else's siloed system. You should not have to rely on closed systems to purchase things. So what are those things? Well, it's everything under the sky. The most lucrative ones are financial contracts. So stocks, bonds, derivatives, options, futures, of course, but also alternative investment vehicles. All of these ought to be on blockchains. Also, of course, things in the physical world that are represented digitally on a blockchain. I think one of the key things that I learned is that blockchains make the playing field even. They open it up to so many more participants. And that is a big change from what we have today. And Avalanche's entire reason for being, raison d'être, is to allow other people to build things on top. And that's what we are working towards. So to that end, we have a very different infrastructure compared to Ethereum. We have a very different infrastructure compared to Bitcoin. And we have capabilities that these ecosystems cannot meet. We can do things they cannot do. In particular, we can allow people to issue digital assets in a legally compliant manner. They can create sub-networks that are specific to different markets. You can have a French sub-network on the Avalanche blockchain. You can have a GDPR-compliant European Union subnet. You can have an American subnet. You can have a Far East subnet. These are all doable, and the need for subnets is not apparent to people yet, but I think it's slowly dawning on them that this is exactly what enterprises have been waiting for.
Et est-ce qu'on peut dire que AVAX est un Ethereum killer ou est-ce que c'est un gros mot pour vous?
No. AVAX is not an Ethereum killer. My background is in Ethereum itself. I love the Ethereum community. I would hate to hurt Ethereum just for emotional reasons. Vitalik is a close friend. Like everybody in that community I have come to meet, I have very close ties to. So that's not our goal. To the contrary, Ethereum 2.0 is an Ethereum killer. Okay, let's just establish some terminology. So Ethereum maximalists it's a bad movement. We didn't used to have these guys. They appeared out of nowhere in the last year and a half. I think they're doing the most damage to Ethereum, and they're branding everybody as an Ethereum killer. I'm not an Ethereum killer. Ethereum 2.0 is, and Ethereum 2.0 is also trying to be an Avalanche killer or an Avalanche copycat. It's trying to do certain things that are copying elements of the Avalanche design. And, it's okay, that's fine if they do that. I think that would put them on a better footing than most. So we're not trying to do that. We're going after assets and use cases that are currently not supported on Ethereum. We support everything. We support the EVM. So we have Ethereum's abilities contained in a subnet on Avalanche. But that's just one of the many things we do. And that's not where I spend my day-to-day. I spend my day-to-day trying to get new assets and new applications onto Avalanche.
Avant d'aller plus loin, est-ce que vous pouvez nous expliquer un peu la valeur ajoutée d'Avax et comment vous souhaitez vous établir dans l'écosystème déjà en place?
So the value proposition for Avalanche is that it is simply the world's most scalable, most flexible blockchain solution that is owned and controlled by people. It's truly decentralized. It is not one of these centralized, pieces of crap that people push. It is not one of these, copycats where you take an old idea and you just, from 20 years ago, and you try to serve it as a new blockchain idea. It's a brand new novel system. It contains a technological breakthrough in it, the Avalanche Consensus Protocol. It's a big breakthrough. It is, in my opinion, the biggest breakthrough in distributed systems since Satoshi. I don't say this lightly. There have only been 3 big steps in the science of consensus protocols. The very first one was a bunch of academic work. And Satoshi came in and said, look, all the stuff that happened before me, it's nice, but it's academic. And in fact, the people who did that was great work. The people who did it have, 2 of them have Turing Awards, separate Turing Awards. It's that important, that work. And yet Satoshi's improvement is just as important. And Avalanche is the 3rd biggest improvement. There is no other coin like it. Everybody else who's trying to do proof of stake is going back to the academic work. They're trying to resurrect very old protocols that have limited functionality. They don't scale to large numbers of participants. And in contrast, Avalanche is unique. It's very, very different. It can scale to millions of participants.
Parlons un petit peu de votre consensus, la grosse valeur ajoutée de votre protocole. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous rappeler ce qu'est un consensus et en quoi le consensus d'Avax est différent de ceux déjà en place? Et comment on imagine un consensus? Amenez-nous derrière la caméra et expliquez-nous comment on crée ça. C'est au cœur d'un brainstorming?
Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about sort of this space, right? My expertise area, distributed systems. So it's not a very old space. It doesn't go back, hundreds of years. It's only like the last 45 years. And in those 45 years, people very, very quickly realized that we need consensus protocols. We need a set of machines to all agree to the same sequence of actions at the same time. This is important. It started out, by the way, with DARPA and the Department of Defense in the US. And one of the main things you want to do is you want to coordinate a nuclear attack. Do we all attack? Do we not? And much more importantly, do we back off after an attack or do we not, right? You don't want people arbitrarily making these decisions because otherwise you'll take the world into nuclear winter. So very, very early on in the late 60s, people realized we need to take coordinated action. And we need to have mechanisms and protocols for taking coordinated action. And what emerged for about 35 years or so, people all kind of gathered around these protocols that we call classical consensus protocols. The protocols I referred to as academic work that was done before Satoshi. In all of these protocols, there is all-to-all voting. They work kind of like a parliament. So there's a large number of us. We elect people into a parliament. There's a leader in the parliament. He proposes a law, and then people vote on that law. And then you have to have some messages, of course, to make sure that everybody in the parliament has seen the same law and that there is enough of a quorum to pass it. So there's all-to-all communication. Because it's all-to-all, these protocols require, if there are n people, then n people have to hear from n other people. So that's n squared communication. If there are 100 people, then you need 10,000 messages. If there are 1,000 people, then you need 1,000,000 messages. That's a lot. If there are 1,000,000 people, then you need 1,000,000,000,000 messages, which is, it's not going to be possible in a realistic time frame to pass that law. So where does that still leave us? Well, that leaves us with 35 years of, so now you're up to, now you understand everything that's happened until 2009. And 2009, Satoshi comes in and says, okay, well, this is a fine idea, but this is a terrible idea. It doesn't work in an open system. You will end up having a small parliament. You will end up having these people inside keep everybody out. And that's exactly what we saw with recent proof of stake protocols like EOS. EOS is a centralized cabal, and they're keeping people out. There are 21 people, and they're keeping people out. So Satoshi said, look, don't go down this path. This is not open. And he came up with this mining-based algorithm. And he's got this very cool idea with proof of work. People are contributing blocks. They get added. The blockchain gets built collaboratively. So that's really bright, really brilliant. But it, too, has a whole lot of drawbacks. It's a very slow protocol. As you know, Bitcoin can only achieve about 3 to 7 transactions per second. It is now trying to be a settlement layer. It is not trying to be a payment processing system. It cannot compete as a payment processing system on layer 1. Layer 2s like the Lightning Network may perhaps one day, if they take off, help us there. But layer 1, as a layer 1, it is not suitable. So then in comes Avalanche. And people just were kind of sitting around now. And there was a lot of myths. I kept hearing from my colleagues on the West Coast, blockchains will never be fast. Blockchains will never scale. These protocols are inherently slow. So in comes the Avalanche protocol. And I can tell you how it works if you want. It's at its core, it works differently. The messaging and the constructions are very different. It turns out, here's how it works. What Avalanche does is exactly the same as what Bitcoin does. Okay, so it's going to make decisions about what happened. Let's say Alice gave some money to Bob, Bob gave the money to Charlie, and so on. So that kind of blockchain buildup has to happen. But it does it without mining. It's based on staking. The stakers, anybody can stake, and you can have as many stakers as you like. You want to have millions of stakers, not a problem for Avalanche. And so now, how are we going to do this? How does one build such a protocol, right? You need an insight. And the insight behind Avalanche is this. And the way, the way to think about this is, I guess, as follows. Imagine you're in a big stadium. Okay, and you want everybody in the stadium to think the same thing, right? You're going to make a decision, tacos or burritos, red or blue, right? Just pick one of those. We're going to pick something. We're going to binary decision, 0 or 1. So that's the simplest example of this problem. We're going to make a decision. We could all follow a classical protocol. I could ask everybody in the stadium, and then they would tell me, and then I would have to, and then they would have to ask everybody. There would have to be a complicated protocol that's n squared. That's the classical territory. Or we could do proof of work, but then we'd have to have mining rigs and electricity usage, and that's also silly. Here's the Avalanche technique, and the insight is, I don't have to ask everybody individually. If I just ask a few people, and they ask a few people, and they ask a few people, it quickly becomes exponential, and you get the coverage you need without having to independently and individually establish the quorum agreement that you need for consensus protocols. So I don't have to independently have asked everybody, as long as I poll, I sample, and there's a process that allows those polled people to converge towards the same decision. So what happens actually in Avalanche, just to be complete, is it works as follows. Every participant picks 5 or 10 people. Let's just say 5. I ask 5 people, and I say, hey, there's a decision to be made between red and blue. Which one do you prefer? And the responses come back to me, and they might say blue, blue, red, blue, red. And in that case, there were more blues. And I would look, I say, okay, based on the sample, the network is veering towards blue, so I'll put my weight behind blue. And other people will be doing the same thing as me. it turns out that if I repeat this dumb process, it's so simple, right? It's just, I ask 5 people and I change my preference. And I repeat this a very small number of times, on the order of 15 to 20 times. So I repeat it maybe 17 times for a realistic sized stadium with over 100,000 people. I repeat it 17 times, and then at the end, everybody in the stadium has the same color in their hands. It works like magic. You might think, well, that shouldn't really work, but it does. It works because the system, the protocol creates some unstable dynamic, and the repeated process forces people to get out of the unstable zone into a stable zone. What's a stable zone? When we all have the same color, we are stable. We've made a decision. So that's how Avalanche works. That's the insight behind it. It's fairly straightforward, and amazingly, it's very, very electricity efficient. It's very, very fast.
Ok, merci pour cette explication. Parlons un petit peu de la finance décentralisée, la DeFi, qui est un point important dans AVAX. Elle a su, cette DeFi, s'imposer dans la BSC ou dans ETH sur Ethereum. Comment vous voyez la montée en puissance de la DeFi dans AVAX?
Yeah, what a great question. Yeah, DeFi space is really, really hot, as you know, and BSC is taking off, and Ethereum, of course, was the incumbent leader where a lot of this activity took place. But Ethereum, became unusable due to high fees. There's a lot of demand for the activity on Ethereum, and Avalanche is here to be the decentralized location where DeFi can take place with very low fees. So there is literally no one in charge. So BSC is a centralized solution. It pretends to be a little bit of to have some amount of decentralization, but at the end of the day, it's under the control of one entity that set it up. And so we are very different. We are truly decentralized. We have on the order of 1,000 validators that make up the network. So this is not just one person and a couple of machines. This is truly decentralized. And it is super fast. It's much faster than every single coin out there. The latencies we are seeing are below 1 second. So if you interact with Pangolin on Avalanche, it's a completely different feeling compared to interacting with Uniswap. Pangolin is a Uniswap equivalent, except it's owned by people. And it's so fast that you think you're dealing with a centralized entity. You think you're dealing with a website, right? Like a regular website, but it's not. It's actually a blockchain. It's the Avalanche blockchain behind you. People who use Pangolin have difficulty going back to Uniswap. They have difficulty going back to Ethereum because it is so fast and the operations are so quick. There is no danger, at least at the moment, of people jumping ahead, because the Avalanche protocol does not have mining. So in Ethereum, if you try to do Uniswap operations, people front run you. They jump ahead of you, and they can cause you to have slippage and to lose money. That miner extractable value in Avalanche is much, much, much lower because there are no miners. It's a leaderless protocol. Now, compared to BSC, of course, we're all at a disadvantage, right? It's like, there was a line of people building the world's better and faster cars, right? So there's like cars like there's like, you've got you've got your regular Volkswagens, then you've got your Porsches coming up. And like I would say, Avalanche is the Porsche of cars. It's like the latest, greatest, highest technology. And then you have this Chinese blockchain that's really operated by one entity. So it's hard to compete. It's hard to compete because they can make their costs arbitrarily low, and they can because it's centrally managed, they can provide incentives for people to use BSC. So what I think we're going to see is a big battle between BSC and everybody else, and we're going to see everybody else allied together, because what we do is complementary to what Ethereum does. We take load off of Ethereum at the moment. And so Ethereum, Avalanche, and other chains that are EVM compatible will band together and will compete against BSC, which is really the one that's it's bringing something that looks like Ethereum but is missing the most critical element, which is the decentralization that is essential to all of these protocols.
On vient de parler de finances décentralisées. Parlons un petit peu de Pangolin, le DEX, l'échange centralisé de AVAX et de son bug. Est-ce qu'on peut revenir sur ce petit point-là? Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé il y a quelques mois? AVAX a été victime de son succès?
Good question. So we went. So Avalanche is a new system. It launched in September, and before it launched, I would go around and I would tell the world, look, there is this new protocol. It is amazing. You should check it out. And of course, they don't listen to you. They want to see it in action. They want somebody else to do the hard work. So at some point, I said, okay, I'll build it myself, and I built it myself. And then came September. And we launched it. During that whole time, every time I said, look, Avalanche is so much better. It's better in terms of latency. It's better in terms of throughput. It's better in terms of security, which it is. It can handle attackers greater than 51%. It has amazing features. And they would say, well, okay, well, what's the downside? What's the problem with Avalanche? And I always said the same thing, which is it's a new protocol. It's new. We're going to have to write it from scratch, and it will therefore not be as mature as Bitcoin or Ethereum. So that was the big worry. So we did exactly that. We wrote the code from scratch, and we then launched the system in September. In February, we had Pangolin go online, and when Pangolin went online, and it went online with a bridge. So assets started flowing from Ethereum to Avalanche. And that created a fantastic cycle for us where people came in and started experiencing the system. So that was a great run up. And when you have so much use, it triggers the points in the code that might have issues. And we had a bug in February. That was a very esoteric bug. It's very complicated, but it got triggered. And once it gets triggered, it causes the system to slow down. And so we had one evening where the system essentially crawled to a halt. It didn't really halt because it was still processing transactions on the X chain, but the contract chain stopped. And so that caused us to scramble. And it also causes people who are new to crypto to freak out. So they get panicky. And that's what happened in February. But we fixed it. We fixed it without any issues. The protocol is safety favoring. So when there is a problem like this, it doesn't make conflicting decisions and cause problems for people. It just shut down. And so it shut down the C chain. And we got the C chain back up in about 8 hours. We got all of the exchanges back up. Some of them took longer than others to come back up. And but it's these kinds of bugs have happened to every other chain, every other one. We had the DAO happen on Ethereum. We had Bitcoin had multiple bugs. There was one bug that caused 4 billion Bitcoin to be minted, right? I mean, this is a big problem. And it did happen. It happened multiple years into Bitcoin's history. So what Avalanche is going through right now is an accelerated version of Bitcoin's timeline or Ethereum's timeline. So we're very quickly living through the early days. So we will encounter new use cases that will cause us to have to worry about, well, should we add new features to the system? Should we change the VM to make certain operations more efficient? These things will happen. And we welcome them. This is part of the evolution of these blockchain platforms. The fact that we addressed this bug very quickly was fantastic, I think. I'm proud of the team's response. And so we've been growing ever since. If you look at our Twitter feed, we are announcing partnerships. We try not to announce things that haven't happened. So most of the time that we announce things, that there is an actual new thing. People are bringing new DeFi Legos on top of Avalanche every other day. I am unable to keep up with what's happening. So we're very vibrant. The community is growing, and it's a fantastic sight to see. So we're growing with leaps and bounds. But what happened in February was this bug episode, and it was a stressful time for me. But I'm glad it's over. And this is the kind of thing that can happen to new chains. This was the one thing that I knew could happen and did happen. And it's okay. The systems are judged not by whether this happens, but by how they react to it.
Ok, merci d'être revenu sur ce point. un dernier mot sur votre roadmap. Que nous réserve AVAX? Que préparez-vous dans les prochains mois, dans les prochaines années?
Oh, the roadmap for Avalanche is fantastic. I am so excited about what is to come. So the platform itself is growing with leaps and bounds. We have this release called Apricot, and it's coming out in phases. We are halfway into this, so we've done the first 2 or 3 phases of Apricot already out. We have a couple more phases coming in. At the end of these phases, the system should be even more nimble and even more lightweight than it has been. So I'm really excited about that. This is a geeky improvement. It doesn't affect users all that much, not on the surface, but it's going to open up a lot of possibilities for us, so I'm really excited. At the same time, there are a lot of new DeFi Legos coming online. So currently we have Pangolin operating really well. We've got new bridges coming online. We are changing Pangolin itself, not we, but the users are changing the way Pangolin works. Pangolin is completely user-owned, user-operated. And it had some initially bad parameters for rewards, and that is going to be fixed starting this Sunday. We have a system called Bonobo. That's a lending platform coming online in the next few weeks. I'm really excited about that. There is a system called Otto. There's a system called Dexalot. Otto and Dexalot are dexes, and they're dexes that are very, very different. They're kind of like Uniswap version 4. They take the Uniswap idea, they take the DEX idea, and they take it far further. They provide guarantees that no other DEX provides. And Dexalot is on-chain, fully open. Anybody can participate. Otto also, anyone can participate. So I'm really excited about these coin offerings. At the same time, at Ava Labs, we've been working at getting enterprises on board our chain. And so I'm really excited to take the innovation that we've done and get really big players to adopt portions of it. So I'm really excited about what is to come on that front. I cannot discuss these events until they're made public, but we've been in talks with a lot of big players, and we understand their concerns when it comes to blockchains. So many of the blockchain efforts are on the West Coast of the United States. They are far from the financial centers of the world. And if you talk to finance people like we have been, we're right next to Wall Street for a reason. If you talk to real big companies that want to use blockchains, you hear the same problems over and over again in a way that you don't hear them if you're on the West Coast, if you're a bunch of techies on the West Coast trying to build a platform. We are not a pure platform play, right? So Ava Labs itself is not just a platform. We're building all kinds of interesting new assets on top. So I'm really excited about those. Just one of them, I can mention this one because we've publicly released it. We have the notion of initial litigation offerings. So as you might know from, this is not the case so much in Europe, but in the US, the justice system is very expensive, incredibly expensive. And often one side or another will settle or will give up because it's so expensive. So initial litigation offerings are a way to finance litigation. And it's a way to get justice delivered to people who need the financial backing to get justice. So I'm really excited about those. That's coming up. So when I say we're not competing with Ethereum, I just mean this. I mean, we're going after things that the Ethereum community is not even thinking about. They're thinking about NFTs. They're thinking about modifications to their base layer, which is fine. But we are doing things on a different level than most other projects. So we have ILOs coming up. That's going to be exciting. We have partnerships and new projects with really big players that we've been working on for months now. So it's going to be a great ride. It's going to be a great ride. Every now and then, Valentin, there's a group of people that work at Ava Labs, and they build cool stuff. And it kind of accumulates. And, I get anxious because I want everybody to see this. I want to be able to talk about them freely. So we have a lot of these right now. I cannot wait. I just cannot wait to put them out the door so other people can see it and we can discuss where we can take blockchains. With a fast blockchain, you can do things that other people cannot even conceive of.
Une toute chose, Emin, est-ce que vous vous rappelez de ce tweet que vous avez publié en 2013? Est-ce que vous diriez la même chose aujourd'hui?
Yeah, so this is kind of funny. I've been around for a long, long time. I was there in 2013 when we were first going online and talking about the security properties of Bitcoin. Back in 2013, I did tweet that now is a good time to sell your coins or something like that, and so this gets brought up against me. So the Bitcoin maximalists are like, oh, he's not a believer. He told people to sell. Well, there are two sides to trading. So there are people out there who will only tell you to buy my thing, buy my thing. And I think those people have no credibility. To them, it's just, okay, great. I get that. I get it. You like Bitcoin. I understand. Like, there are a bunch of people like this. Or you like some other coin. I say, buy it, hold it. Yeah, but to what end? Everybody must sell sometimes. A good trader will identify opportunities to sell and buy back in at a lower price. So there is nothing wrong with somebody who says, you know what? Bitcoin is overpriced right now. Sell now, buy later. This should be a possible thing to do. And this is not a cause for trying to shame someone. I have zero shame when it comes to that tweet. I didn't delete it. I think that tweet is something I said and I stand behind. Prior to that tweet, everybody thought that Bitcoin was immune to attack as long as the attacker was smaller than 51%. We showed, right after that tweet, or right around that tweet, we showed that Bitcoin is not immune to attack. Bitcoin is open to attacks by people 34% and above. And at the time, there were some groups that were 34%. Bitcoin actually got 55% attacked. Like, there was a group that grew to be 55% later on. These are terrible things. And it's because of the work we did that we now understand what the limits of Bitcoin security are. And because of that work, we can stand behind and stand away from that. So left to their own devices, all of these Bitcoin proponents would have blindly done things that were unsafe. And now we understand what's unsafe. I played a pivotal role in trying to push back miners that were attacking, like they didn't realize they were doing this, but they had created a 55% monster, and it was killing the value proposition of Bitcoin. I was involved in pushing back against them. I've been involved in many pro-Bitcoin efforts. I've briefed many more politicians than, in fact, I've briefed more politicians than just maybe a handful of other people. Like Coin Center in the US has done a lot of work, but I am right up there behind them, having briefed a huge number of politicians as one of the few academics in this space early on. So I am responsible for telling them, use a light touch when it comes to regulating Bitcoin. The nice environment that we enjoyed in the United States, I played a role in it. I worked to make Bitcoins more secure. I did a whole lot of things for the cause of cryptocurrencies in general. So on occasion, I will tell people to sell things. On occasion, I will say, this coin is complete crap. I have said this also about coins that were complete crap. I have said things like, this coin is, as it stands, is currently insecure. So I will do this. And on occasion, when you have these crazy people whose net worths are tied up so much in Bitcoin, they get upset. But at the time, that was the right message. And there was a dip in price after I tweeted that, and after corresponding to the security issues that we raised. And then, of course, it recovered, and that's fine. I'm a long-term believer. Look how much of a long-term believer I am. I dedicated many years of my life to this space. I dedicated many years of my life to making cryptocurrencies safer, better for normal people to use. And I've published more than most other people, I would say, probably any other academic, on the topic of blockchains. So I've been here. I've brought respectability to the space. I've brought attention from mainstream academics to the space. I believe I have done more than any other academic has in making the space better. So I'm really proud of my record, including that tweet. So anybody who tries to give me grief about it, I just smile and I say, look, don't you wish you were there with me in 2013? At that moment, you should have sold. Then buy back, 5 days later after it's sorted out. That would have been not a bad trade. So Yeah, I've also, yeah, I mean, I've done this for other coins as well, as I mentioned. This is not a bad thing to do. People should be doing more of this. We can't just be like, buy, 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 buy. This is not some kind of a buy and hold kind of a thing. These things have to be useful. They have to be safe and secure. And when they're not, you have to tell the world.
Thank you very much, Emin. Merci beaucoup pour toutes ces réponses. Est-ce que vous avez un message pour la communauté française d'AVAX?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a fantastic discussion. It's been a great discussion. And to the French community, I would like to say thank you so much for supporting Avalanche. There are quite a few supporters of Avalanche in the French-speaking portion of the world, specifically in France, but also outside. And to all of them, my heartfelt thank yous. And to cryptocurrency enthusiasts everywhere, thank you so much for being part of a huge ride. I've been in this space for a long, long time, as we discussed today. You are going back to 2002 and also in the early days of Bitcoin and on. And I knew where we were going. I had no doubt that one day all of these things would be as big as they are now. And I have no doubt today that we're going to be even bigger by multiple orders of magnitude going forward. We're going to reimagine what every company does in their backends. We're going to reimagine what happens at NASDAQ, what happens in all of the bourses, the stock markets of the world. We're going to redo what happens in London, in Brussels, in obviously Paris, obviously Istanbul, obviously all around the globe in financial centers. And we're going to digitize every single asset. And I hope you'll join us along for the ride because it's going to be fantastic and incredibly rewarding episode. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup, Emin, pour toutes ces réponses et à très vite. J'espère que vous en avez appris beaucoup dans cette interview. Et si vous souhaitez plus d'informations au sujet de cette crypto-monnaie, on a pas mal d'articles et de papiers à ce sujet sur le site de cryptost.fr. J'espère que l'interview en anglais vous aura plu. N'hésitez pas à nous faire vos retours en commentaire. Quant à nous, on se retrouve rapidement sur YouTube ou sur le site directement de cryptost.fr. À bientôt.